Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, Dan. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So many places to go. Marketing, automation, sales, HubSpot. I guess maybe for a good jumping off point is just kind of like what's new at HubSpot. What are you working on these days?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot is new at HubSpot. HubSpot started as a marketing automation tool, as a lot of folks know, way back when, and started with the concept of inbound that has become pretty popular. But now inbound is just de facto. Everybody does inbound. You've got to be doing it along with outbound. I think the best strategy is doing a little bit of both. So I think HubSpot's growing up as a platform. Instead of just being a marketing tool, I think we're becoming a CRM platform that has marketing, sales, and service that is really primed for companies ready to scale up quickly. And you can't really just scale with marketing automation. I think that's one piece of the puzzle, but you need to have sales engagement tools to allow your reps to have those one-on-one conversations. You need to be, giving great service post sale. So following up with clients and making sure you're delighting them after the sale. So I think HubSpot is kind of attacking that whole go-to-market arm of your business from marketing, sales, and service, and wrapping it all into a friendly package where everything is pointing back to the same contact record and the same CRM. Because a lot of folks have these multiple systems and data's everywhere, and it's a little bit messy. So HubSpot aims to kind of clean some of that up and make some of that data more actionable. So.
Right. That makes sense. And can you talk, just to back up a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about what your day to day is like and what areas you're focusing on and what you're selling and so on at this point?
Yeah, definitely. So I am in channel sales at HubSpot, meaning I work with our agency partners. HubSpot has about 5,000 agency partners all over the world that we partner with to sell HubSpot. Actually, over half of HubSpot is sold with the help of an agency partner. So it's a huge revenue driver for the company. And so I've got a group of those agency partners that I work with on. My background is in sales and sales leadership. So I work with them on kind of setting up some of their sales processes, systems, and helping to position HubSpot when it makes sense. But really just helping to enable them from a sales perspective to go through a pipeline and be kind of that outside sales coach or mentor that they may have never had. A lot of agency owners don't have a sales background. They come from a creative background. So we kind of bring, on the channel side of things, bring some of that sales leadership that can be really impactful for a small agency who may not have a ton of experience doing that. So.
Right. And just to understand that a little bit better. So when you're, selling HubSpot to a smaller agency, is that mainly focusing on helping them sell themselves using HubSpot, or their end clients, or all of the above?
I think it's all of the above. I think first, it's easiest to use HubSpot yourself. I mean, some of our agency partners that come on didn't have a CRM in place. They, data's kind of all over the place, so they're just keeping up with it in a spreadsheet or via email. So I think starting to use HubSpot yourself, whether that's the CRM tools, the marketing tools, the CMS for your website, I think starting to get into those tools, I think is what a lot of our agency partners do initially. And then it helps for them to better position their, HubSpot to their clients because they're using it themselves and they're able to, like, I use our sales tools every day. So it's really easy to sell our sales tools because I use them all the time. So I think we try to get our agencies to do the same kind of thing. Get into HubSpot, learn the tool. I mean, you've got to buy the tool, at least a certain amount of it to be in the program. So you've already paid for it. You might as well now use it so then you can better position it to your clients.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of starting with, using HubSpot for internally, selling and marketing the agency. I think one dynamic that I know you're familiar with that we see a lot is an agency that has gotten from 0 to 1 on their network and referrals and kind of like, really not a lot of established like sales practices. Maybe there's an owner or like 1 or 2 salespeople. And then, they're like, well, we should get HubSpot. And then it's sort of like I always likened it to renting or buying an 18-wheeler to move your 1-bedroom apartment, and it's just like, you've got this massive, sophisticated piece of equipment that may or may not be, maybe like extreme overkill for what you need when, it's really just talking about going from there. So first I'd love to hear, if you agree or disagree with that, and it's okay if you disagree.
Yeah.
Just maybe like how you can better prepare to, be ready to take on a tool like HubSpot.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think First of all, it depends on, did you already have a tool in place? Like, are you using Infusionsoft or Keep or ActiveCampaign or MailChimp? Are you already using a tool like that to manage your business, or are you not using really anything at all? Because if you're not using anything, I think you can start with just HubSpot's free tools. We give away our CRM for free. So while we do have the 18-wheeler, which is kind of some of our pro or enterprise tools that can be expensive for a small company, we also have like free and starter tools that can be less than $100 a month. So I would say start where you are. Don't start where you think you need to be. Don't bite off more than you can chew, I guess. And for a lot of folks, that means just starting with the free tools, like using our free CRM or just using tools that like some of our starter tools, which would be great for doing some list segmentation and email marketing and some connecting it to your Gmail so that you have emails flowing in and those notifications for opens and clicks happening. So I would say there's a lot of entry points with HubSpot, from very, very little to very, very massive. So choose that entry point that makes sense for you. And it doesn't always mean the pro or the enterprise tools just because you think that's what I need to have, because it may not be what you need to have. We have a lot of customers who've only used our free tools and have never paid HubSpot a dime, and that's all they need. So I would say, as an agency, figure out what you need, figure out your entry point, and then kind of grow with HubSpot versus putting that square peg in the round hole too early. Otherwise, may make sense to stay with your current tool until you're ready to make that jump. So.
Yep, that makes sense. So with that in mind, and kind of, HubSpot aside, kind of just thinking about general best practice a little bit. So there's so much that you can be doing, right? There's the newsletter, and then there's free tools with the CRM and that sort of thing. So I want to kind of figure out like what's a good jumping off point. So if I'm, a busy agency executive and I'm doing sales, maybe let's say max like 5 hours a week when I have time, what's that sort of basic starter pack I should be thinking about? Like, what, not just in terms of the tools, but in terms of like how I budget my time between a CRM, between a newsletter, and anything else.
Yeah. I think it's tough. I mean, I think for me, I think agency owners should be focused on building their personal brand and their personal network. I think that, especially in a small company where you're the face of the company, I think there's nothing more important than doing that. And I think a lot of that can just be doing some personal content yourself, whether that's related to I think it should be related to your agency, probably geared towards your target audience. And, you should be putting that content out regularly, whether that means starting a podcast or putting out a newsletter or having a blog that's speaking to that target audience that you're after. I think that's a great starting point. You honestly don't need any tools to do that. You need a cell phone, and I guess that's it. Maybe, internet connection. So, but it takes like being intentional. We talked about this when you were on my show. Like, it takes being intentional with that strategy, like being intentional about what you want. Who do you want to target? What is that message that you're going to be putting out there? And then just pounding that same message over and over again, repurposing the hell out of that same message. I think a lot of people worry like, oh, I can't say that same thing again because I just said that last week. It's like, no, you need to be saying the same thing over and over and over again, because your audience, your target audience, is seeing 1 out of every 10 of your messages. So you want that one to be the exact right message to that exact right person. So I would say, like, work on building that personal brand, that personal, marketing, if you will, like doing some of that inbound. I think that is a great place to start. And then from there, it should naturally open up to having some sales conversations, which, we can go down that path if you want, but, like learning how to run a good discovery call, I think is really important. Learning how to position, your offering, like what do you do on the front end? Are you doing a foot in the door offer? Are you positioning a retainer right off the bat? There's a variety of best practices, I think, from that point. But if you're not creating a lot of those initial conversations, then what's the point of getting good at a discovery call if you're not having any? So I think you've got to start with like doing some of this inbound and creating some of this energy around your brand and your message. And then from there, you can then learn how to run an effective sales process. So
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because I definitely run into that myself where I'll sound like a broken record in my own head and just sound annoying to myself. But you have to remember that you're not that important, and most people aren't going to get it until the 10th time. So I think that's worth repeating. To nerd out a little bit more though, so I'd love to just kind of help people understand what best practices they should be implementing when they're in that CRM. I think we see a lot of kind of tendency to try to over automate or overthink it and that sort of thing. And what we do, just internally at Sales Schema is we're on a different CRM, but it doesn't matter. And there's a filter that tells us, okay, this person hasn't been contacted in 30 days. And then once we can basically see those people, and there isn't like an automated thing we do once somebody hasn't been contacted in 30 days, but it's a filter that we look at, and then we can decide, okay, maybe we'll do a mail merge to a bunch of people, maybe we'll do an individual outreach, maybe we'll invite them on a webinar. So it's sort of like semi-automation. It's more just an alert that kind of lets us know when to think about kicking people back into gear. So I'd love to understand what do you recommend in that regard? Is there a cadence for reaching back out to old prospects that HubSpot's helping with? Like, what are you seeing to be effective in that regard?
Yeah. What CRM do y'all use internally, Dan?
Oh, we use Streak.
Okay. Gotcha. So, I think a lot of this, at the end of the day, a lot of these tools do a lot of the same thing. Like if you want to set up a filter view, like what we're talking about in HubSpot based on no activity in the last 30 days, you can do the same thing in HubSpot. I'm sure you could do it in most CRMs. If you can't, that's probably an issue. That's probably a red flag. Like, why can't I do this in my CRM? So I would say setting up some of the same kind of things within HubSpot. I mean, if we start to get, if you're starting to talk about, sounds like you're mentioning reaching out to old prospects, like close lost deals, it sounds like is potentially one opportunity. I mean, I think, just building a view and then sending a campaign to those folks, whether that's a one-off campaign or you can set up, a drip campaign inside of HubSpot where you can touch those people over time. I mean, I think you should be doing that with all people that have never bought from you that are inside of your web until they unsubscribe, until they say, "Hey, I'm sick of you." I think you should be reaching out to them periodically and reaching out with hopefully some helpful content. Like going back to like inbound is not just creating content. Inbound is being helpful. It's a helpful human approach to doing business. And I think what you can use like this inbound content that you create in your outbound strategy. You can, because what are you going to say in these emails? Hey, I'm Sales Schema and I offer outbound sales services. Like you can only say that so many times versus, hey, I'm Dan and here's a trend I'm seeing that's really helping 5-person agencies scale to 10 people by doing a targeted, LinkedIn strategy over a 60-day period. This is some results that we've seen. Here's a blog article. Here's a podcast episode that I talked about it. If you ever need any help, here's my meetings link, kind of a thing at the bottom. PS. So I think like having like a lot of great content that you can put out to your audience in an outbound way, but you've got to have something to say to them. And hopefully it's more than just buy my services or book a meeting with me. It's got to be like, I know you, I know what you go through because I know so much about who my target audience is. And here's some ideas here's what I'm seeing in the market. Here's a conversation I had on a podcast. Here's something I think would be relevant to you specifically. And you can do that in one-to-one outreach, or you could also do it one-to-many if you've got those people segmented and organized in your database. I mean, you can do it either way, but you've got to have something to say. So I think we should always be focused on building that knowledge base and building that personal brand. But the personal brand should be around thought leadership. Why should I care? Dan, what do you know that Tyler doesn't? How can you help me? Like those kind of things, I think separate, the folks that end up with those initial discovery calls and the folks that end up, getting unsubscribed from. So.
Yeah. And I've heard that drumbeat for so long, and I'm not saying I disagree with it. I think that has its place. And like, we're putting out, obviously doing a podcast right now, putting out content constantly, but it's always sort of a push pull to me. And I'm always sort of trying to figure out the best way to do it internally because we're selling to, and this is true for our clients too. They're selling to, CMOs of Fortune 500 brands or whatever. We're selling to agencies where there's an executive that's managing dozens and dozens of people and clients and that sort of thing. that I'm always trying to figure out, okay, how much is reasonable for these people to ingest? How much content, are they, is somebody, can I reasonably expect the CEO of a 50-person agency to get on an hour-long webinar, a 30-minute webinar, or even read, a 30-page white paper? And I've just, or whatever, not 30 pages, but you know what I'm saying, a blog post, let's say. And so far, like what I've seen convert well is really just, being in front of people and sort of just reminding them that you're still there.
Yeah.
And then I've noticed that the content, like the stuff we're doing now, tends to appeal to people that are maybe either at an earlier stage, or they might be in sort of a growth position within a company, right? And they're trying to improve their skills. But the ultimate decision maker that's going to be signing on the dotted line is really just sort of like, okay, timing's good now. Thanks, Dan. You're in front of me. Let's sign up. So first, I just want to hear your thoughts on that dynamic, and maybe I'm full of it.
No. I mean, I think people don't have time. Yeah, I agree. Very few people are going to sit down and listen to this full podcast episode. However, I think that there's 30 seconds of this episode that you could use strategically that might be relevant for a specific person. Like, hey, that really resonated. Like what Tyler said there, that really resonated. And I'm going to send that in a 10-second little teaser. Hey, I thought this would be relevant to you, CMO, CMO target audience fit, or, just whatever. Like, hey, I've been having a sales conversation. We were just talking about this. I think those kind of things, like repurposing this 30 minutes into 20-second snacks, I think would be an effective way to go about it. Cause few people have time to look at everything. And then I think you've got to decide, like, are you going to go top? Are you going to the top? Are you going to go straight to, because typically like that CMO is not making decisions in a silo, like, challenger selling and, challenger buying these days. Like you've got at larger organizations, 5 to 8 people in the decision-making process. And any of those people can derail your deal. So I think you should be focus on the company, focus on an account that you want to get into. And the CMO is the end decision maker. They probably even have somebody above them at the executive level or the CFO that would have to sign on the dotted line to give you 10 grand a month. But at the end of the day, there's probably 5 to 8 people inside that organization that are involved in the decision. So don't just view this as, if I don't get to the CMO, if they don't listen to my podcast, then I'll never get into this account. You sometimes have to go bottom up. You've got to figure out, okay, who else might be involved in this decision? Oh, there's a marketing manager over there. Oh, there's a junior copywriter over here. Oh, this person's doing social media. So if you start making all these little touches and these little inroads, then all of a sudden it's like, well, who the heck is this Dan guy from Sales Schema? He's over here. He's talking to this gal over here, this guy over here. And like everybody's getting to know Dan, such that then if you do, hopefully get to the top, whether that's inside or you get directly to the CMO, you've already got like some relationships built up and some credibility versus just, I'm just now meeting Dan for the first time. Nobody on my team knows, like, hey, everybody, here's Dan and what he has to offer. That's a lot harder of a sell. So sometimes it's easier doing that bottom up approach and getting those influencers bought in, because they might end up pushing you up, or at least they'll have some familiarity with you and wouldn't derail the deal should you finally get to that CMO. So
I think that's a really good point. And I think what's challenging, for lots, especially small organizations, is that consistency, because you don't always get that feedback loop. You don't always get the reward of knowing that your content has converted somebody until it happens, which might be months down the road. And then it's like, hey, I saw this thing you guys put out a while back, or whatever. So I think that's the tough thing. So with that in mind, what have you seen work in terms of how to delegate this and how to make sure that, you are putting out content regardless of how busy or not busy you are?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have a roadmap for what you want to do with your content. It starts with your ideal customer profile. And then it's about building out, like, what makes you different? Who do you want? Okay, I'm starting a podcast. Like, what guests do I want to interview? What kind of conversations do I want to have? What are my call to actions from a podcast, from a newsletter, from a blog post, from a social post? Like, where do I want to send people? And then, having those kind of paths that you can get people onto your email list and start nurturing those folks internally. I think you've got to outline all of that to begin with, and then have people internally that are responsible for this part of that process or this part, and who's actually sending it out, who's clicking send or scheduling these posts over time, that kind of thing. And then from there, you've got to intentionally like make time to do prospecting. I mean, this is the hardest part, is that no one likes to do prospecting. I mean, you could put 2-hour block of prospecting on your calendar and you end up doing 5 minutes of prospecting during that time because you're so you don't set yourself up for success. You don't actually make a list of people you're going to call or reach out to online, or you're just scared. Prospecting is scary. It's scary to reach out to strangers with, you're worried about rejection. You're worried about interrupting their day. You're worried about being, just not welcome. And so I think you've got to learn to get comfortable with that. All this inbound and creating content is great, but at some point you've got to actually have a conversation. Like no one can buy your $5,000 a month retainer from a blog post. I mean, if they can, great. That's awesome. You figured out how to do that self-service. But at the end of the day, a lot of these agency services are still human to human. At the end of the day, someone is talking and having a sales conversation. And that's the next piece of this puzzle. Like we've been talking about inbound and creating content. That's great to fill the top of the pipeline. But if you don't know how to move somebody from interested to signature, then that's how you stay in business. So I think that becomes a crucial piece, is like, what is your sales process? Who's running it? Like, who's doing the initial touches? Who's running a discovery call? Do they know how to run a discovery call? What questions do you ask on a discovery call? What's the exit criteria to go from discovery to demo or to, proposal? Do you even have that defined? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who get worried about the end of the beginning of the sales process, like inbound. How do I fill? I need more prospects. Or the end. How do I close better? You win and lose deals like in the middle. You win and lose deals in discovery. And a lot of people stink at discovery. So I think those are the things that you need to start really working on once you have enough prospects to talk to, once you feel like you have services to offer on the back end that you can actually, close and it's relevant to that person. It's like, how do I get really good at the middle of the sales process, which is the discovery.
Right. And kind of getting towards the end of the time, I think we could probably do a whole nother episode on later in the funnel sales. And I hope we do, because I think that would be really interesting. But what I've found with sales is it's really, it really is a place of continual learning, and it's not like you learn a bunch and then that you're good. It's more like a cup of water that you keep drinking and then you have to keep filling it up again, And I just find that, it's really easy to fall back on bad habits and so on. And then there's stuff that I've learned, all the time, even like a decade into doing it or so. So I guess with that, I'd love to just kind of like personalize this a bit. Like what have you learned recently that's helped you in your game, so to speak?
Yeah. Specifically, you're talking about kind of sales skills. What have I learned?
Yeah. What comes to mind?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind, and I've done this throughout my career, but Sandler's big on doing upfront contracts, and I've kind of glossed over. Are you familiar with upfront contracts, Dan? Yeah. So I've gone in and out on like how formal I want my upfront contract to be. But at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to the point I was just making about exit criteria for a deal to move on from discovery to the next stage. I think it's important that you set the stage for every call. If you're doing sales and you're running an effective sales process, you are the quarterback and you are setting the tone for that meeting. And a good upfront contract on every call, no matter if it's a discovery call, the first time you're talking with somebody, it's a closing conversation. It's, no matter where you are in the sales process, you need to do an upfront contract, and you need to make sure that everybody's aligned on why are we here? What is the goal of the call today? How much time are we going to spend? At the end of the call, we're going to agree to do one of two things, A or B. Are you comfortable making that decision at the end of the call? And then setting clear next steps. We're going to set some clear next steps from there. So I think if you have that little 30-second, 60-second upfront contract for every single conversation, you at least know you're going to start the call correctly. Now, the call might go off the rails immediately after the upfront contract, but at least you were in control at the beginning, and at least you've gotten some agree. You want to get them to agree to next steps at the beginning of the call. We are going to agree on moving in direction A or direction B at the end of that call. Are you comfortable doing that? If you can at least get them to buy into that, then at the end of the call, it makes it a lot more natural to say like, hey, I think we've had a great conversation. The next step in the process is typically I would talk with other members of your team, or it may not be a good fit at this time. Like, which direction do you feel like we should go? Or I'd love to chat with those other members right now. Like go ahead and assumptively, assume that they're going to go in a positive direction. So, but I think doing an effective upfront contract is always a good choice. And it's something that people rarely do, and rarely, if they do it at all, or they just gloss over it. They do it, they barely do it. Hey, today I'm going to learn a lot about you. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and then we're going to determine if you're a good fit for our services. Does that sound good? Like that's not a great upfront contract, because what are they really agreeing to there? That's what everybody says. It needs to be more clearly defined, more, here's the roadmap for this call. Here's the direction we could go at the end. And then I think you've got a better chance of having an effective call at that point. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's something that is, that we've been working on a lot more. And I think that it's not unlike any good book or movie is that you kind of get a feel for, okay, Star Wars is going to be the hero's journey and so on. Like these things are going to happen in this order. And you can almost, you can almost have anything play out as long as you set that expectation that this is how it's going to go. So I think that's really good, and there's a lot of repeating. So Tyler, I guess with that, where can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, certainly. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can search me there, Tyler Lindley, Lindley. I have my personal website, tylerlindley.com, and I have a podcast that Dan just joined for an episode that we released just a few weeks ago. And that is The Sales Lift. So you can go to thesaleslift.com or just search The Sales Lift anywhere where you get podcasts. So
awesome. Tyler, thanks again, man. And yeah, let's do it again soon. Let's do a more, let's nerd out on sales and
let's do part 2 of like running an effective sales process from discovery to close. I think a lot of people would get a lot of.
And then the last one will be yacht shopping.
Yeah, exactly. Immediately transition to yacht shopping. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
All right.